Hi everyone, I'm Bob Safian, former editor of Fast Company and host of the podcast Rapid Response, where I interview CEOs about real-time leadership. And I'm delighted to be here to moderate this opening conversation with the CEO of PMI, Pierre Le Manh. Pierre, thanks so much for doing this today.
Hi Bob, thanks for having me.
So we're coming together at a moment that is exciting, for some people challenging, new technologies, new ways of working, new kinds of delivery for the project world. Here on the 20th anniversary of International Project Management Day, how would you describe the current state of project management?
So, project management is, first of all, about the project economy, right? You have to take it in the context of what industry we're in, right? And the project economy is about 1/3 of the global economy. So think about maybe the global economy is about $100 trillion. That's about $33 trillion. So it's a very large, frankly, sector if you think about it, or activity. There are a number of factors that drive growth in the project economy that is actually faster than the growth of the global economy. One of them is, of course, the state of specific economies, right? When you're at this kind of tipping point between, let's say, $4,000 and $18,000 per capita, is when typically an economy is going to have a lot of projects, right? It's the moment when economies have enough resources to start investing in infrastructure and they're not developed enough that, at one point you can't build more freeways and hospitals.
Right, you're mostly full up.
Yeah, not necessarily entirely, but it slows down a little bit. So between 4 and 18,000, you got 70 countries in the world, more or less, which are in that range, and that's about 1/3 of the global economy as well. So that drives growth in the project economy. Then you have the whole digital transformation that affects all economies, but in particular the most advanced economies that have legacy businesses that have to transform. And then you have this whole movement towards sustainability. Everybody understands that we have some big issues almost as a species, right? The human species has big issues to face. And that drives, of course, investments that are only at the very beginning, by the way, to transform everything we're doing to be more, not only sustainable, but even more regenerative, right?
And so in this environment, there are skill development choices that project professionals have to make. They're more complicated, more varied than they've ever been. At PMI's recent global summit, you talked about gold standard certification. So what are gold standard certifications and why, in this environment, are they particularly important?
Yeah, we see PMI as a broker of trust between employers and, of course, people seeking employment or people who are staffing projects. And you want the people making those decisions to know that the professionals that they recruit have certain skills. So it's very important that we keep this standard at a high level. And we felt that in a world, especially with the development of EdTech, which, by the way, we are part of as well, but we've seen a proliferation of courses, certificates, micro-credentials, and the whole environment has become more blurred in terms of what is really trustworthy, what is less trustworthy. A brand is something, but what about the content, right? So we felt that it was really high time for us to restate what is a gold standard certification, professional certification, what it means, and what are the requirements of a gold standard certification. I'm not talking about the requirements for the person taking the exam, but the requirement for the certification itself. What does it mean? What kind of criteria does it have to abide by?
Because some of these certifications have more value than others, both because of what they require and because of the trust that has been built up in them over time.
Of course, and you can lose that trust if you're not very careful, right? So for instance, our gold standard certifications have to abide by a number of very strict criteria. They need to have a proctored exam, to give you an example. They need to be backed by a professional standard, or at least a practice guide that has been written by experts in the profession and recognized. So those are examples of things, and we have a long list of criteria that any gold standard professional certification should abide by, that we are committed to deliver on, to make sure that again, as brokers of trust, we are trustworthy.
You mentioned a blurring of lines, and I've noticed that there's more blurring of lines in some ways between what some might call agile approaches traditionally and some would call like traditional project management approaches, right? More predictive or linear. You've talked about a full learning ecosystem related to agile. What do you mean by that?
So I think there are, in fact, two, it's not exactly questions, but 2 points that you're mentioning that, if you don't mind, I'd like to, to address them a little bit separately. So this whole question of agile, predictive, in fact, project management was never meant to be only predictive. Just turns out that when the agile movement came, especially in the software industry, they kind of cornered project management as being very predictive. So basically, you have to have a fully fledged plan before you start executing anything, and then you just stick to the plan, whether the plan makes sense or not, right? So it was never meant to be that way. But agilists were smart positioning project management that way. Obviously, there's a continuum. Like, it's not like you either do fully predictive or fully Scrum. It depends on the industry, depends on a lot of things that relate to the project itself. At PMI, we're principle-based, right? So we never said you should apply such or such methodology. We try to give you an understanding of all frameworks and methodologies that apply, but also a mindset where, depending on the particular circumstances of a project, you pick the right approach, right? And it's actually your number one responsibility to pick the right blend of approaches. So that's why we talk about hybrid. It's the idea of making sure you apply the right methodologies based on a set of principles. Now, you're asking a question about our Agile certification, the full ecosystem. That's a slightly different thing. We use at PMI to be focused on the certification and sort of delegate all the rest. We have taken a different stance now where if someone is to prepare for a certification, a professional certification delivered by PMI, then we equip you with a full ecosystem that helps you get ready for that. And also maintain your certification by staying current, right? So it includes e-learning, a whole ecosystem of training partners, a standard, a guide, potentially some AI-based tools, all sorts of things that you can use to get ready for your exam, and then to maintain your level of skills even years after you got your certification.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because I had misunderstood. I thought sort of the full ecosystem was about encompassing all of the things from agile to predictive and everything else in between.
Which we also do.
Which you also do, but that's not what that phrase specifically refers to. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I have to ask you about generative AI. Are you as focused on AI as every other CEO I talk to?
Even more, maybe, because if you think about it, our profession has I see it first of all as a massive opportunity, right? Because AI transformation being everywhere, like you just said, because every CEO is thinking about that. So projects to transform any business model, any company, leveraging AI or adjusting to an AI-based world are ubiquitous, right? We're seeing everywhere projects around that with a lot of investments and, of course, a lot of visibility as well. So for project professionals, being able to manage the AI transformation or AI transformation projects is critical. Seeing that and also recognizing that some of the tasks that project professionals do every day will be automated or augmented or transformed in some ways with the, of course, the penetration or prevalence of generative AI, we thought it was very important for us to be ahead of the curve, right? And we really want to lead the AI transformation of project management. So we launched courses very quickly. We currently have 3 courses that are free for all members. We have 2 more coming by the end of the year. We already had over 350,000 people who have taken our courses. So that's one thing. We produced a lot of thought leadership content. We also, as you may know, launched our own AI platform called PMI Infinity. We're already at version 2.0 that basically enables professionals to use all our content, all the knowledge that has been accumulated and functionalities that have been built around an OpenAI instance. So based on that, they can actually be more effective doing their jobs.
Not just in the project world, but all over in the business world right now, there are people who are, as you say, excited about AI, and then there are people who are terrified about it, that it's going to change things so much for them or take away their jobs or sort of force them to work in a different way. for folks who are watching this and listening who might be on that more anxious side, do you have any advice for them? Any suggestions about how they think about it?
You know, it's frankly, using generative AI is not that difficult. So first of all, they should not be too worried about their own ability to use it or leverage it. 90% of project professionals say that generative AI is going to have a massive impact on their profession or their jobs. Only 30% are actually using it regularly on their jobs, right? I mean, it's actually better than 3 months ago. 3 months ago it was only 20%, so we moved from 20 to 30. That's not too bad.
Yeah.
But of course, our role at PMI is to make sure that everybody, anxious or not, understands that there is no real way back. But you're right, sometimes I'm hearing, you should fight to stop AI penetrating project management. But this is not going to happen, right? That's not a fight that I can lead, because it's not, I don't think
it's just not realistic.
No, it's not realistic at all.
Yeah.
And it's actually a big mistake, because in reality, with AI, we can be a trailblazing profession, adopt it faster than others, and then manage those AI transformation projects, which will give us a lot of recognition and create a lot of value for the companies we work for. So it would be a big mistake. And it's not the end of the world, you know, frankly, to start using generative AI. I use it every single day in my own job. You know, and it's very useful. And I experiment, and progressively you get better at it.
Yeah, are you using it, like, are there specific things you use it for, or is it mostly sort of experimenting and getting comfortable with it?
I absolutely use it for reading documents for me sometimes. Like, I receive 200 pages, I don't have the time. Upload everything, summarize all of this for me, compare to different documents, tell me what's interesting in there. And I know it's like a very competent, qualified friend, right? And so they can be wrong sometimes. And I have this in mind, but still, they make me gain a lot of time.
Yeah.
I use it sometimes to change my emails. Like, I get frustrated with something, I write an email, I draft it, and before pressing the button, put it back to Gen AI. I say, what do you think of my email? Always say the same. It's great, super direct, very clear. Maybe you could be a little more empathetic, and does it better. So, you know.
Yeah,
helpful.
input is, and I guess safe input is you're not required to use it. You're choosing to use what you want. Are there any other sort of technologies or new ways of working that you have your eye on about impacting the project world?
I think maybe it's not a new ways of working per se, but the rise of hybrid work post-COVID. I mean, during COVID and post-COVID, of course, as consequences. You know, I'm a great believer that we will long-term get rid of offices for maybe some types of activities we require being physically there, but most of them at least in developed economies, in the most mature economies, can be done virtually. Doesn't mean that we won't meet in person sometimes, like we are right now.
Yes.
But it's going to be, again, a very hybrid situation, and having offices in a world that has to be more sustainable, I don't think is going to stand.
Yeah,
and
managing.
It's very costly.
Yeah.
The big carbon footprint relative to offices is actually quite massive. So, getting rid of all of that and being able to work with teams that live anywhere,
right,
that are very diverse. I see this as a long-term trend that is going to be very difficult to fight. And so for project professionals, being used to work in these kind of environments where people are based in different places, to come from different cultures, expertise is critical. But by the way, our profession has been pretty good at that, because even before COVID and before this rise of hybrid work, project teams usually had more chances to be located in different places, even different companies, than ongoing operations.
And there's so many stakeholders that you're managing that they're not necessarily all going to be within your four walls.
So again, a big opportunity for us, because I think we're ahead of the curve, and we can double down on that and be even better.
Now, PMI recently did a big research project around project success. I think the largest you've ever done.
That's right.
Why did you choose to do that now? And are there specific things that you found about it that really pop up to you?
Yeah, we chose it mostly because when we came up with our new strategy called PMI Next, one of the things we did is to re-express our purpose. It might sound obvious, but the purpose of PMI had been sort of diluted and lost. And if you ask 10 people, you had 10 different answers about what we're supposed to do. Some would say, well, it's about supporting the profession. It's about providing ideas, advancing the science of project management, could be, represent like almost being a union for project professionals worldwide, or trying to do good for the planet. So everybody.
All those are good things.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong about any of that. Or be an e-learning company, whatever. So we worked with our board of directors and our executive team to come up with a proper re-expression of our purpose. And the thing we came up with is that what we do as a purpose is to maximize project success to elevate our world. So 2 components: maximize project success, and also this idea of being responsible, thinking in a sustainable way, so that projects can contribute to a better world, right? So we still had to define, so what is project success, and get a sort of 0.0, right? A deep dive on current state of project success. So that's why we launched this massive research program, as you mentioned, which included like several phases: qualitative, quantitative, experts talking and everything. We surveyed 10,000 people over 150 countries, asking them about their last or latest project or program, and many questions, trying to understand the drivers of success as well. But one thing that came out of this research, which by the way we haven't published yet, but very soon, the first thing that came out is that the success of projects can be defined in a different way than we have in the past, or slightly different way. And the definition that came out of this research program is that project success is when the outcome was worth, or the value was worth the effort and expense, right? So project success is when the value exceeds or is worth the effort and expense. And what is interesting here is that it's a combination. First of all, it's an equation, right? So you can play on both sides, limit waste, increase the value. But there's also a very perceptual element in it. The value here has to be understood as the perceived value by the people that the project serve at the end. Be it consumers, investors, the public, whomever is a stakeholder, the end stakeholder of the project will have their own perception of whether a project is successful or not. So if you think that way, if you understand your responsibility, your accountability as a project professional as making this equation work, then your job goes beyond project management success. It's not just about the techniques you're employing. It's not even...
It's about the people, too.
It's not, exactly. It's not just about even delivering on time, on budget, on scope. It's making sure that the value that is perceived by the end user will be high, right? So your job is also to sell the project and making sure that you make the constant adjustments to get there.
And this equation you're talking about, is this NPSS, the net progress success score?
So we asked people, by the way, in the past, I've seen so many times X% of projects fail, as if it was a binary thing, like yes or no. We all know that projects sometimes are somewhere in between. It's not a complete failure, not a complete success, right? So we asked people to rate their success, the success of their last project, based on that definition, on a scale of 0 to 10, right? And so we simplified all of that using a score that is similar to the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, right? So the people who are, it's like the high scores minus the very low scores equals a certain NPS. So we replicated this for project success. And we found that 48% of projects were reasonably successful overall, 12% a complete disaster, and the rest, which is about 40%, somewhere in between, not at the level that you would want them to be, but not a complete disaster either. So we eliminate that middle part, and you take 48 minus 12, and we ended up that overall right now, to this day, across all industries, the NPSS, the next Net Project Success Score, is 36. And then we compare by industry, by country, by source of funding, and we see all these differences, and I think it's going to help us think about why. Why is it that projects are more successful in, for instance, infrastructure than they are in consulting? Why is it that projects that are funded by venture capital are more successful than projects funded by governments?
I mean, it's interesting because this is kind of a radical shift for thinking about project success, for it not to be about budget and time, right? Like those have been the constraints that have sort of usually...
They matter too, right? Because it's worth the expense and effort, right?
Right, so it's part of this, but,
exactly.
you're looking at it not as not binary in that way, right? Not just those two tracks, but the perception of it also.
And how, how does it relate to the value? So basically, was it worth it in the end? And I always think of
because something could be over budget and take longer, but still
very
be
valuable.
valuable.
And conversely, you could absolutely deliver below budget something that is totally useless, and people will feel this is like a failure in the end. And you don't want to be associated to that failure and just say, because I'm the project manager, I'm not responsible for the poor design. That's true initially, but then as you take ownership of that project and that equation, you will always make sure that along the way, the value that is perceived by the stakeholders, the people you serve, is going to be there, right? So either because you sell them properly the project, or because you adjust. And very often project professionals feel this is not my responsibility.
Yes,
and that shift in mindset is so important for our future success.
Yeah, you're asking more of project managers to be more strategic minded in what they're doing.
You can position it that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's good for them too if you are that
Sure.
way, right? Because you're getting judged on strategic metrics, or strategic approaches, even if you're, as you say, you delivered on time and on budget. People could still be upset with the project.
I want project professionals to be recognized. I want them to be successful. I want to help them with their career. And sometimes they ask me how to be more successful. Should we have a seat at the C-suite? Should there be a chief project officer? That kind of things. And frankly, yes, maybe, but this has to be earned. And in my opinion, the way to earn it is to focus on project success, the way we just described, and own it. Yes,
and value, because value will get everyone's attention. Right?
But not necessarily the value that as it is defined before the project starts. It's constantly adjusting to increase the perceived value of your outcome.
So as you're talking about all these changes that the project world is dealing with, new success metrics, new technology, AI, what are the skills that you think project managers and project professionals need to focus on most to thrive in the world ahead?
Yeah, so we at PMI we have this triangle that everybody knows in the PMI world, right? The 3 types of skills you need to develop. At the bottom, you have what we call the ways of working. That's basically understanding all the methodologies, the approaches, the management theories. What is lean? What is DevOps? What is Scrum? What is, what's a schedule? How do you manage to create some work breakdown structure, and the phases of project management, all the stuff that you have to learn, the ropes, right, of the profession. And then we have a second side of this triangle, which we call the power skills. That includes a lot of things around communication, being able to convince, empathy, managing people, the whole, we used to call them soft skills. We call them power skills at PMI. I think the idea was that it's not that soft.
No, these aren't easy things to do.
So power skills. And then, interestingly, there's a third side that nobody talks much about, but it's there. It's called business acumen. So personally, I believe, first of all, there's no way out of the bottom, right? So the ways of working, you have to master that. It's not because accountants were able to spend a lot less time doing calculations when Excel came that suddenly we accept that because they're now helping or supporting the business people more, we accept that they make mistakes in the accounts, right? That's not an excuse, right? So it's the same for project professionals. It's not because now some of the tasks will be automated by AI that it is okay to be incompetent as a project professional. So let's be very clear about that. You still have to learn all the ways of working, and actually more and more because it's accumulating. But it's easier to learn because you have AI, you use PMI Infinity, you learn so much faster because we can learn faster with all these new technologies. Now, the power skills, still the same, super important, especially as we discussed before. You tend to manage teams in a multicultural environment. It's hard to manage people who are hybrid, not always there.
Yeah.
Increasingly, companies specialize. So on the same project, you'll have more and more companies involved, so you have to deal with people from different cultures, environments, different maybe even situations in their own companies that they have to deal with, right? So it's very complicated, and you need to keep learning that. But if you want to do what I was just referring to, focus on increasing your strategic thinking, making sure you go beyond project management success to be accountable, fully accountable of project success, then in that case, the business acumen becomes so important as well, because you need to be able to speak the language of your CEO, speak the language of your consumers, speak the language of all the people who are the ones you serve with your projects, right? So that understanding requires, I think, a lot of effort from project professionals. Many of them do not come from sales. They don't come from finance. So they got to learn all of that. It's not that complicated. My grandma had a very strong business acumen without going to business school.
Right. Right.
For the most part, it's common sense, if you think about it. But you still need to get to learn it.
And understand where the value is being created for that organization,
Yeah.
for that project, for that constituency.
And how the C-suite speaks and think. They don't talk about benefits realization. I've never heard that from any CEO in my life. Project professionals use that word, but CEOs don't. But they do talk about market share. They do talk about customer satisfaction. They do talk about innovation. That's language that they understand.
Yeah, and so it's worthwhile if you're a project professional to understand those terms and what they mean and how they might apply to what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How have initiatives like IPM Day, which we're here for, sort of contributed to the advancement of project skills and project work?
Generally speaking, I think that the more we do for our profession to feel that they are part of a real profession, the better off we are. Because 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when PMI was created in 1969, and I talked about that with Jim Snyder, our founder, who unfortunately passed this year, Jim really explained to me how at the time, project management was not a profession at all, right? So people were engineers, were coming from different areas, and they were managing projects and did not exactly know what were the recipes, right? So that's how PMI was created. A few professionals coming from different horizons, trying to see if there were some lessons they could learn or share from their respective experiences, and then learn together and be better, right? And so we amplified that to where we are today. Millions of people are part of PMI, either as members or certification holders. So definitely we've seen that when the profession has a place and moments and symbols that reminds all of us that we are a profession, then that helps.
The I part of IPM I want to ask you about, the international piece of it. You were telling me you just came back from some travel yourself. You're traveling all the time, but you were in London, you were in Korea, you went to Mongolia. When you're traveling this way, are there different impressions, views of projects and project professionals that you come across? Do you feel like there's any challenges or any opportunities in what you see when you're traveling around?
So first of all, there are differences, definitely. It's not just the country, it's also the type of industries. But I think it's very important that we don't focus only on the differences. And on the other hand, the more we focus on what is similar, the more we'll gain, right? Because once you've said it's very different, it's a very easy thing to do or to say, right? We're different. But if you're different, then you have nothing to learn from the others. Like, what's the point? If we're together, it's to focus on what is more similar than the differences. Now, of course, if you go to you mentioned Korea and Mongolia. I was there this weekend, actually, in both countries. They are very different countries, right? I mean, they're close, not too far, but they're very different. Korea has a GDP per capita of about 37,000. The median age in Korea is 44 years old. Mongolia has a median age of 29 years old.
Wow.
GDP per capita of 5,000. The size of Mongolia is massive, right? The sustainability problems that they have to face is incredible. Korea is a pretty advanced economy at this point, and they've already diversified. Mongolia still relies a lot on mining, right? So of course, the type of projects, the problems that they have to face are slightly different. But in the end, managing a project still has big similarities. And trust me, when I spoke with both, we had events with our professionals in Korea, and then a big event, 800 people in Mongolia. The questions they ask, the focus they have is not that different. There are many similarities.
And I'm curious, we're here on the 20th anniversary of IPM Day. What do you think people still misunderstand about project work and the role of project management in the world, even 20 years on?
We unfortunately sometimes the title is an issue, right? So not all project professionals are called project managers, right? We are seeing, frankly, sometimes the frontiers are blurred between what is a project professional or project manager and program manager. Sometimes just like semantics, right? Not always, but sometimes some industries would always use the word program manager, like in aerospace, defense, way more frequently than in other industries where the same person would be called a project manager. We also have to face the preconception. Again, we talked about Agile and how Agilists have been sort of able to corner, for some reason, project managers in purely predictive approaches, which is like a caricature, right? So but we do suffer from that sometimes. People feel that project management is about making a plan and then sticking to the plan, or distinguishing project management and product management. There are differences, but there's an overlap. Like about 60% of what a product manager does is in fact the same thing as what a project manager does. And in some industries, a product is never fully finished, right? It's like a constant iteration. And so this idea that a project has a very clear beginning and a very clear end is also a misconception. In many, many industries, and increasingly so, that frontier is not that clear.
It is interesting. I often reflect on how Hollywood, they call movies projects, but rarely do they define themselves or call themselves project managers. Yet, of course, if you are the director of a film, you are definitely leading that project, right?
Yeah, that's actually interesting because we've been in LA like a few times this year. We had our global summit this year in LA, and we had a number of other events in LA. And so, of course, as we're in any city where we are, we try to get contacts with the local industries and have them come and talk and speak and share their experiences. So we had this year many situations where directors, people from Hollywood came to PMI to explain what they were doing. And they were actually saying themselves, actually, I'm a project manager. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, right. And they probably say, I wish more of the folks on my team really understand how to operate projects so that I wasn't the only one doing it.
100%. And it's the same in the tech industry, all the startups. You have so many situations where a founder is a great visionary. They're excellent as understanding the market need, raising funds, inspiring everyone. But the project management side may not be the best. And we see many VCs, for instance, and investors telling us, look, we want to find ways for project management techniques to be more prevalent in the organizations, in the companies that we're investing in.
Yeah, because they have to get things done, right? It can't just be an idea. You have to actually get something done.
Get things done, manage potential risks, not in a negative way, but have some ideas on how you would mitigate unplanned situations. Everything, all the things that project professionals do, like in their sleep.
So I know we don't have too much more time together, but I did want to ask you about. I know you see project management as a tool for progress and for positive change, and I'm eager to hear how you feel that will unfold over the next 20 years. What role might the project world have in creating a better future for us?
Yeah, it's interesting you're asking because 2 or 3 weeks ago we had the UN General Assembly, so I actually came back to New York between multiple trips to go there. And we're part of the Global Compact Initiative, and there's a conference at the same time at the UNGA called Concordia, and I was on a panel, and the topic of the panel was how can project management help drive the Sustainable Development Goal, the SDGs, or Global Compact. How can it help drive it home, right? So everybody understands that we need to go from talks to action. And the reality, in my opinion, is that all these great goals, ambitious goals, very noble goals, which I absolutely support, by the way, they're very useful as a compass, but they will only be implemented if some people on the ground do it, right? It's not just going to be a few head of states and CEOs making great speeches at lunches at the UN once a year that will make the whole difference. In the end, it's going to be on the ground. And that's where millions of people getting things done, like project professionals, are the ones who can manage this transformation. We need them to be focused on it as well. And there's a lot of appetite, especially from younger generations, to learn how to apply sustainability or regeneration to what they do, right? If you're in the tech industry, you're not so sure as a project professional, even if you're very willing to do that, you don't know exactly what does it mean in what I'm doing, implementing some or helping with the Sustainable Development Goals. So those things can be learned, and there's a big commitment of PMI to help them get there.
And I guess all of the new skills, the new tools, AI, all of that should help accelerate that if the project world can lead and embrace that in the way that you're hoping it will.
Absolutely. If you use PMI Infinity 2.0, you upload your project documents, your charter, and you ask PMI Infinity, can you help me do something about the sustainable development goals? Like, how can I help in any way with this specific project? Infinity is going to help you.
Well, Pierre, this has been great. Thank you so much for being here and for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
All right. And thanks everyone for joining us.